The morning my daughter-in-law told me to cancel my own doctor's appointment because she needed the car, I did not say anything. I just nodded, handed her the keys, and walked back to my bedroom. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at my hands. They were the same hands that had worked 31 years as a school nurse, the same hands that had held my son the night his father died. And now they were folded quietly in my lap because I was afraid to speak. But that was 3 weeks before everything changed. Let me take you back to the moment she came home and found the front door locked with a key she no longer had. Her name is Vanessa. She is 34 years old. She has long dark hair and a loud laugh and a way of walking into a room like she already owns it. She stood on the porch that afternoon, with 2 shopping bags hanging from her wrists, and her mother, Diane, standing behind her holding a coffee cup. Vanessa pressed the doorbell once. Then again. Then she knocked. I could hear it from the kitchen where I was sitting with my cup of tea. I did not rush. When I finally opened the door, Vanessa's face went through 3 expressions in less than 2 seconds. Confusion, then irritation, then something close to fear. Because behind me, sitting at the kitchen table, was my lawyer, Richard Calloway, and on the table in front of him were 2 folders, a printed bank statement, and a letter with her name typed clearly at the top. "What is going on?" she said. It was not really a question. I stepped aside and said gently, "Come in, we need to talk," and that was how it ended. But let me tell you how it began. My name is Helen Marsh. I am 67 years old. I live in a grey and white house on Clover Ridge Lane in Columbus, Ohio. It is not a large house, but it is mine. I bought it with my husband, Frank, 26 years ago. Frank passed away from a stroke 4 years ago, and since then I have lived here alone. I have a garden in the back that I tend to every Saturday morning. I have a tabby cat named Biscuit who sleeps on the armchair by the window. I have a savings account I built carefully over decades of working, and I have one son, Marcus. Marcus is 37. He has his father's eyes and his father's stubbornness, and unfortunately, his father's habit of trusting people completely before they have earned it. He married Vanessa 2 years ago. The wedding was beautiful. I cried during the vows. I thought I was gaining a daughter. When Marcus came to me 6 months after the wedding and said they were having trouble making rent, I did not hesitate. I told them to move in. I had the spare bedroom and the small office room that could become a second bedroom if they needed it. I said it would be temporary. Marcus said 6 months, maybe 8. He promised they would save and be out before the year was over. That was 14 months ago. The first few months were manageable. Vanessa was polite mostly. She would say good morning and occasionally offer to help with dinner. Marcus would mow the lawn without being asked. There was an adjustment period, the way there always is when adults share a space, but I told myself it would smooth out. I told myself we were family, and family makes things work. Then small things began to shift. Vanessa started leaving dishes in the sink overnight. I would come downstairs in the morning and find the kitchen exactly as she had left it after midnight. When I mentioned it once, gently, she said she was exhausted from work and that I should understand. I said I did understand. I cleaned the dishes myself. She began using my car without asking first. Not borrowing. Using. She would take the keys from the hook by the door, the hook I'd put there for my own keys, and simply leave. I would find out when I went to the garage and found it empty. When I brought it up, Marcus said, "Mum, she just needed to run a quick errand. It is not a big deal. Maybe keep a spare set somewhere she knows she can use. A spare set. For my own car. In my own house." I kept quiet. Vanessa's mother, Diane, began coming over more frequently. At first, it was Sunday dinners. Then it became Thursday evenings as well. Then Diane started arriving on Tuesday afternoons while Vanessa was at work, just to keep me company, she said. Diane was not an unkind woman, but she had opinions about everything. About the way I arranged my living room, about the brand of coffee I bought, about how I kept the thermostat too high. One afternoon she rearranged the books on my hallway shelf because, she said, it would look more inviting for guests. I did not say anything. The thing about staying quiet is that it does not feel like a choice in the moment. It feels like the reasonable option. You tell yourself it is not worth the conflict. You tell yourself you love your son, and his happiness matters. You tell yourself these are small things, and small things do not deserve to become large arguments. What you do not realize, not until much later, is that every time you stay quiet, you are teaching the people around you exactly how much they can take. Vanessa learned quickly. About 4 months into their stay, I began checking my bank account more carefully. I had given Marcus access to one of my accounts years earlier, back when he was in college, and I would transfer him money occasionally. I had never removed him. I assumed he had no reason to use it anymore. I was wrong. The first charge I noticed was $60 at a home goods store. I did not remember buying anything there. I scrolled back further. There was a charge at a nail salon. A charge at a wine bar downtown. A charge at a wine bar downtown. A charge at a clothing boutique on the north side. None of them were mine. My hands went cold. I said nothing that night. I printed the statements from the past 4 months and sat at my desk with a yellow highlighter. When I was finished, I had highlighted 41 charges, totaling just over $9,000. $9,000! I had worked 31 years for that money. I had given up vacations and new furniture and the kitchen renovation Frank and I always talked about. And it had been spent on wine and manicures and things I would never know the names of. I folded the papers and put them in an envelope in my desk drawer. I needed to think clearly before I said anything. I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with. The following Saturday, I asked Vanessa directly. I waited until Marcus was out and Diane had not yet arrived. I poured 2 cups of coffee and set them on the kitchen table and asked her to sit down. She sat, but she had already put on her slightly impatient expression, the one she wore whenever she sensed a conversation she did not want to have. I said, I have been looking at the account Marcus has access to. There are some charges I do not recognize. She picked up her coffee and said, Marcus probably grabbed some things, you should ask him. I said, the charges are from places Marcus does not go. A nail salon, a boutique on Garfield Street. She shrugged. Oh, I might have used it once or twice when I forgot my card. I meant to mention it. Once or twice, I said gently. Over 4 months. She looked at me and her expression shifted, not to guilt, but to something else. A kind of impatience mixed with something that looked almost like contempt. Helen, she said, she never called me Mom. We live here. We contribute. The utilities are less, now that there are more people splitting the warmth. The food budget stretches. You benefit from us being here too, you know. I benefit, I said. She stood up and carried her coffee toward the hallway. I think you are being a little sensitive, she said. We can settle it all when Marcus and I have our own place. She said it the way you say something you have no intention of doing. I sat at the kitchen table alone for a long time after she left the room. That was the Saturday I decided I was finished being quiet. I did not tell Vanessa. I did not tell Marcus yet. I called Richard Calloway, who had handled Frank's estate and who I had known for 11 years. I told him what I had found. He asked me several careful questions. Then he said, Helen, you are the sole account holder on that account. Marcus was listed as an authorized user years ago. Has he given Vanessa permission to use it? I said I did not know. Richard said either way, she had no legal authorization. He told me to start documenting everything and to call the bank and request a full transaction review. I spent the next 2 weeks doing exactly that. What I found when I looked deeper made the $9,000 feel like just the beginning. There was a credit card I had applied for years ago and used only for emergencies. I kept it in the small zipper pocket of my desk organizer because I had always been careful about credit. I had not used it in almost a year. When I called the card company to check the balance, the woman on the phone paused before answering. Mrs. Marsh, she said carefully, there has been significant activity on this account in the past 5 months. I gripped the phone. How much activity? I asked. $14,300. I had to sit down. I asked her to read me the transactions. Hair extensions, a weekend hotel stay, spa packages, not once but 4 times, a laptop, restaurant charges that went on for 3 and 4 hours at a time, and then, near the end of the list, something that stopped my breath entirely. A charge for a business registration fee, and a monthly billing subscription for a website called vanessamakes.com. I thanked the woman and asked her to flag every transaction from the past 5 months. I told her no one else was authorized on that card. She opened an investigation immediately. After I hung up, I sat very still for almost an hour. Vanessa had not just been spending my money. She had been using it to build something, a business, a website, a brand, with my credit card, in her name. I thought about all the evenings she had sat at the kitchen counter with her laptop, telling Marcus she was working on a project. I thought about the packages that had been arriving at the house, addressed to her, boxes I had never thought to question. I thought about the way she talked sometimes about wanting to start a creative business selling handmade home decor. How she said she had all the ideas but just needed the starting capital. She found the starting capital. She found it in my desk. I called Richard again. I told him what I had discovered. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Helen, this is no longer just unauthorized use of a bank account. Using your credit card without permission to fund a registered business in her name is serious. This is fraud." He asked me again if I wanted to press charges. He said the decision was entirely mine, but that I should understand what had happened was a crime. I told him I was not ready to decide that yet. But I was ready to do what I should have done months ago. I called a locksmith. I had the front door lock replaced on a Wednesday morning while both Marcus and Vanessa were at work. I had a new key cup for myself and one for Marcus, which I left in an envelope on the kitchen counter with a note that said only, "We need to talk tonight." I took back both sets of car keys. I transferred what remained in the account Marcus had access to into a new account he was not linked to. I cancelled the compromised credit card. I called the business registration office and reported that my personal information had been used without my consent. Then I called Marcus. He arrived home before Vanessa that evening. He sat across from me at the kitchen table with the look of a man who already suspected the conversation would be painful. I placed the printed statements in front of him without saying anything. I watched his face as he read. He looked up after a few minutes and his eyes were wet. "Mum, I did not know. I believe you," I said. "But Marcus, you gave her access to your trust and she used mine." He shook his head slowly. "She told me the account was something she and I shared for household expenses. I had no idea she was using it this much. And the credit card," I said. He looked confused. "What credit card?" I told him. I watched his face go pale. "She has a website, Marcus. She registered a business. She bought equipment. She built something with money she took from my desk without asking me once." He put his face in his hands. I said, "I love you. I am not angry at you. But I cannot allow this to continue." He nodded. He looked broken in a way that broke my heart a little too. But love does not mean absorbing harm without limit. I had learned that late, but I had learned it. When Vanessa came home that evening and found the new lock, she called Marcus from the porch. He let her in. She walked into the kitchen and saw me sitting there with the statements spread across the table. She also saw Richard Calloway, who I had asked to come that evening to ensure the conversation stayed clear and documented. She looked at him, then at me, then at Marcus. "What is this?" she said. Marcus said her name quietly. She ignored him and looked at me. "You went through my things," she said. I said, "You went through mine." I handed her the card company's letter. She read it once. Her jaw tightened. "I was going to pay it back," she said. "I always planned to pay it back," she said. "I always planned to pay it back." "When?" I asked. "When the business started earning." "So you use my credit to build your business," I said, "and plan to repay me with the profits. Without telling me. Without asking me. Without asking me." She crossed her arms. "You would have said no." "Yes," I said, "I would have. Because it is my money, and that is my right." Her voice rose. "We live here, we have made this house better. I painted the back room. I bought new towels for the bathroom." "With my credit card," Richard said quietly. He did not say it unkindly. He said it the way you state a fact. Vanessa looked at him sharply. "Who are you exactly?" He told her. Her face changed. "You brought a lawyer," she said to me. Her voice had gone cold. I nodded. This needed to be documented. She turned to Marcus. "Are you going to let her do this to me?" Marcus looked at this to me. Marcus looked at her steadily. "Vanessa," she showed me the credit card. "Tell me it is not what it looks like." There was a silence that lasted long enough to answer his question on its own. Her mother, Diane, arrived shortly after. She must have been called while Vanessa was still on the porch. She came in without knocking, which she had long since stopped doing. She looked at the table and at Richard, and then she looked at me with the expression I had seen her use when she disapproved of my thermostat settings. "Helen," she said, I think you are being dramatic. Family shares. Richard looked at her calmly. Are you a resident of this property? Diane blinked. I visit regularly. Then, respectfully, Richard said, this conversation does not involve you. Diane looked at Vanessa. Vanessa looked to the floor. I spoke. I said what I had spent weeks preparing to say. Vanessa, I am not pressing charges today, but I need you to understand what you did. You used my identity. You used my credit history, my account, my card, my address to build something for yourself, without my knowledge, without my permission. And when I stayed quiet about the smaller things, you did not take it as kindness. You took it as an open door. Vanessa's chin lifted. I needed a chance, she said. No one was giving me one. I was giving you a home, I said. I gave you a room and a kitchen and a driveway and warmth in the winter. That was a chance. You chose to take more than you were given. She did not answer. Marcus stood up. His voice was quiet but firm. How much in total? He asked. Richard stated the amount, $23,400 across both accounts. Diane made a sound. Vanessa closed her eyes briefly. Marcus nodded once. He looked at Vanessa. You need to leave. She looked at him. What? You cannot stay here. Not after this. You are choosing her over me. Marcus said, I am choosing what is honest. His voice did not break, but I could see what it cost him. Diane stepped forward. You cannot put her out tonight. Richard said, legally, Mrs. Mees. Marsh has the right to ask anyone without a lease agreement to vacate with reasonable notice. He placed a document on the table. She has provided 30 days. That is more than required. The room was very quiet. Vanessa picked up the document and looked at it. Then she set it down. She picked up her purse from the counter. She looked at Marcus once more, and he met her eyes but did not move toward her. She walked to the hallway. Diane followed, still holding her coffee cup, still wearing the expression of someone who believed the whole situation was a misunderstanding that had been blown unnecessarily out of proportion. When the door closed, Marcus sat back down. The kitchen felt very different. He looked at the statements for a long time. I sat beside him. I did not fill the silence. Some silences need to stay. Finally, he said, I kept telling myself everything was fine. I know, I said. I thought you were just adjusting to having people in your space. I thought it was normal friction. I tried to tell you once, I said, about the car. He nodded slowly. I told you it was not a big deal. You trusted her, I said. That is not a crime. But Marcus, trust without attention is not a gift. It is a gap. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I need to call her. I need to understand what she was thinking. I said, you should. But do it away from here, when things are calmer. Do not make permanent decisions in a painful night. He looked at me. Are you okay, Mom? I thought about the question honestly. I said, I am sad. I am tired, but I am okay. He reached over and put his hand over mine the way he used to when he was small and something frightened him. We sat together for a while without speaking. Vanessa came back 3 days later. Not with anger this time. She came alone in the mid-morning, when she knew Diane would not be with her. She knocked properly. When I opened the door, she looked smaller than I had ever seen her. She was not wearing her usual confidence the way a coat. She was wearing exhaustion. Can I come in? She asked. I stepped back and let her in. She stood in the middle of the kitchen and looked around. I made tea and set a cup in front of her, even though she had not asked for it. She wrapped her hands around it. I do not know where to start, she said. I said nothing. I waited. She said, I have been thinking about what you said, about the open door. She paused. I grew up watching my mum ask for things and get told no. She asked my dad for help with her business idea twice and he told her it was unrealistic. She asked her parents once and they said they had nothing to give. She looked down at the tea. I think I decided a long time ago that asking was pointless, that if I needed something I should just find a way to get it. I listened. I am not saying that makes it right, she said quickly. I know it does not. I know what I did was wrong. I told myself it was borrowing. I told myself you would not notice. Both of those things were lies. I chose to believe because it was easier. I said, you believed I would not notice because you believed I did not matter enough to be noticed. She looked up. Her eyes were wet. That is not what I thought. But it is what you showed, I said gently. She looked down again. I know. There was a long pause. She reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. She slid it across the table. I could not cover all of it, she said, but I spoke to my bank. I am taking out a personal loan in my own name, a real one, to repay you. This is the first payment. The rest will come monthly. I will sign whatever you need me to sign. I looked at the envelope but did not open it. Vanessa, I said, this is not only about the money. I know, she whispered. It is about trust, yes. And it is about what I taught myself by staying silent. I let small disrespects grow because I was afraid of losing Marcus. I did not say anything about the car or the dishes or the accounts until it had become something that could not be ignored. That was my failure too. She looked at me with something genuine in her eyes for the first time since I had known her. I think I counted on your silence, she said. I know you did, and I am telling you now it is over. Not my love for Marcus, not the possibility of a real relationship between us someday. But the silence, that is done. She nodded. She wiped her face. She asked quietly, do you think Marcus and I can survive this? I was honest with her. I said, I do not know. That depends entirely on what you both choose from here. But you cannot build anything real on a foundation that was never yours to begin with. Not a business, not a marriage, not a life. She sat with that for a moment. Before she left, she turned to me at the door. Thank you for not pressing charges, she said. I looked at her steadily. I chose to protect myself rather than punish you. Those are different things. Do not mistake mercy for the end of consequences. She nodded, and then she left. The house was quiet. I stood in the kitchen and looked at the table where, 14 months ago, I had set an extra key for my son and his wife, and believed in good faith that things would be fine. I walked to the window and looked at the garden. It needed attention. The winter had been long. Marcus came by that evening. He had been staying with a friend since the night Vanessa left. He sat in the armchair by the window. Biscuit climbed immediately onto his lap, which made him smile a little even though his eyes were sad. We talked for a long time. He told me about the conversations he and Vanessa had been having, about the counsellor they had agreed to see together, not to save the marriage necessarily, but to understand what had happened in it. He told me he was not angry at me. He told me he was angry at himself for not paying closer attention. I said, you gave your trust completely. You are your father's son. He said, that is not always a good thing. I said, it can be, but only if the person you trust earns it. He was quiet for a while. Then he said, Mum, can I stay here for a while? Then he said, Mum, can I stay here for a while? Just me. While Vanessa and I figure things out. I looked at my son. I looked at Frank's eyes in his face. I thought about the morning I had driven Marcus home from the hospital the day he was born and had sat in this very house and made a promise to keep him safe. I said, of course, but Marcus, I need you to hear me say this once, and I need you to keep it. He looked at me. Tell me. This is my home, I said. I love you without limit, and I will never stop. But this house has rules now, and the rules are mine, and if you are here, it means you respect them. Not because I am asking you to choose me over anyone, but because I have spent too many mornings cleaning up after people who forgot that I exist. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said, I hear you, Mom. Good, I said. Now I am going to make dinner, and you are going to tell me what vegetables you actually like, and we are going to eat at the table like human beings. He laughed. It was a tired laugh, but it was real. The following month, I met with my financial advisor and had every account reviewed and restructured. I updated my will. I placed a small framed note on my desk that said, in my own handwriting, in plain black ink, your kindness is not a debt anyone is owed. I look at it every morning. The things I lost, I will not pretend were small. I lost months of savings I had set aside for a trip I always wanted to take to see the coast of Maine. I lost some of the trust I had carried easily for most of my life. I lost the version of myself who believed that staying quiet was a form of grace. But I found something in exchange. I found the sound of my own voice in a room that had forgotten it. I found that when you finally say no, clearly and without apology, the people who love you do not disappear. Some do, but the ones who stay afterward are the ones who were really there to begin with. I found that a home is not just walls and a roof. It is the way you feel when you are alone inside it. And for the first time in over a year, when I came downstairs in the morning and put on my kettle and let Biscuit out into the garden, the house felt like mine again. That is not a small thing. If this story spoke to something you have carried, something quiet that you have been telling yourself does not matter, I want you to leave a comment below and tell me what you would have done differently. Because sometimes the most important moment is not the one where you finally speak up. Sometimes the most important moment is the one just before, when you decide that you are worth speaking up for. And if someone you know needs to hear this today, share it with them. Subscribe so you do not miss the next story. Because every week I am here, and every week I will tell you the truth about what it means to finally say enough. There is something I have come to understand about the way quiet people get hurt. It rarely happens all at once. It happens in small steps, each one just slightly further than the last, until one morning you look around and realize you are standing somewhere you never agreed to go. That is where Helen found herself, not robbed in an instant but walked back, inch by inch, into a corner she had helped build by saying nothing. The hardest truth in this story is not what Vanessa did. People who feel small sometimes reach for things that do not belong to them. That is a failure of character, but it is also a kind of human desperation. The harder truth is what Helen admitted out loud at the end, that her silence had been part of the equation. Not the cause of what happened, but the condition that allowed it to grow. When we absorb small disrespects without naming them, we are not keeping the peace. We are teaching the people around us where the edges of our patience are, and some people will keep walking until they find the actual wall. What changed everything for Helen was not anger. Anger had been there quietly for months. What changed everything was a decision. The decision that her own life, her own savings, her own name, her own home were worth protecting out loud. That shift, from enduring to acting, is what the whole story turns on. And it did not require cruelty. It did not require revenge in the dramatic sense. It required clarity. A locksmith. A phone call to the bank. A lawyer sitting at a kitchen table. Simple, clear, documented actions taken by a woman who had finally decided that love for her son did not require her to disappear. This is what real moral courage looks like in ordinary life. It is not a speech. It is not a confrontation built for an audience. It is getting up on a Wednesday morning and changing the locks because you have thought it through carefully and you know it is right. It is the willingness to let someone be upset with you rather than allow harm to continue. And Vanessa, in her own way, was also given something by Helen's refusal to press charges. She was given the chance to face what she had actually done. Not through punishment, but through consequence. There is a difference. Punishment can be endured and resented. Consequence, when it lands clearly and fairly, has the power to teach. Vanessa returned with a cashier's check and an honest sentence. I counted on your silence. That admission only became possible because Helen stopped providing it. If you are watching this and something in it feels familiar, I want to say this simply. The people who take advantage of your patience are not doing it because you are weak. They are doing it because you are kind, and kindness without limits is something some people will test until it breaks. The answer is not to become hard. The answer is to become clear. Know what you will accept. Know what belongs to you. And when someone crosses that line, say so, not with rage, but with the steady voice of someone who has decided they matter. Helen mattered. She just needed to remember it. And the day she did, everything changed.